So I want to build an investment group. That would mean that I bring people together so that we can invest into opportunities together. And I do have a background in the financial industry. I haven't worked in the industry formally for years now, several years, probably since about 2017. So it's been about 4 years since I was formally in the financial industry. However, I've been studying, and I'm always looking ahead to put a plan together on how I can do this investment group. So one of the most important things that I have to do is I have to put together a board of directors. So if I help people invest into opportunities with me, there's going to be some people who pitch in a little bit and come up along the way, but there's going to be some people who are big players who like what I'm doing and who are probably going to want to be like a bigger investor, pitching in bigger amounts, matching me, probably doing more than me in investment. And I would need to have an organized way of conducting this investment group if there is the possibility that this thing could blow up and it gets bigger, a bunch of money gets pulled in. So I need to be real organized. I need to have a board of directors, right? I need to do this thing right. So since I've been studying, I've figured out how to organize this. What I mean when I have a board of directors is there needs to be business people who can make decisions for the investment group. Let's say there's an opportunity and we pull together like 10 people. They all pitch in different amounts. Well, they all have an equity. Equity means they have ownership on the profits of this opportunity according to how much they pitched in. It's the portion of what they pitched in to the investment is the portion of equity that they would have, right? Owning some of the profits from the opportunity. So we have a group of 10 people all pitch in different amounts. What we would see is that not all 10 have the same amount of business expertise or ability to make some of these decisions. Some of them want to make good investments, but when we're going through these investments, there's options or there's choices to make. Sometimes you go left or you go right, or maybe the options are not clear and we have to find what our options are and help the group decide. So some of us, like myself, with a lot of business experience and some investing experience and with a great network, right? People that I can call on to help us make decisions. Some of us would have to carry more of that weight. And so the position and the role that you give those people is a director of the investment group. So that's one of the most important places I have to start. I have to be organized with how I'm going to build a board of directors for this investment group. And in thinking about that, I need to find who the founding investors are. So myself and my wife, of course, are part of that founding investors. But at the same time, there might be other people who are going to be big players in this investment group, and we would want to consider them early on from the start. So reaching out to my network, I want to see if there's anybody who wants to be a big player in this, because we would consider them as founding investors. And all these founding investors would decide who should be on the board of directors. Another thing though, besides the founding investors, I need to figure out how we're going to come up with an investment strategy. So as we have a group of founding investors and we want to be big players in this thing, and we want to allow other people to invest in the opportunities, even if you're not a big player, but we want to allow other people to invest in the opportunities, and we're going to pull it all together. We're going to put together a board of directors that represents us all on these investments. So it's this big project, but how are they going to go about deciding? When this group does come together, how do we go about deciding what we invest into? There needs to be a strategy in place. How do we come up with that strategy? What is a good strategy? This is why it's important to have expertise on the board of directors to help us make these decisions. And typically investment groups like this, whether they're mutual funds, private equity companies, bunch of stuff, little terminologies I could throw out like that. But what I mean is people who come together to invest together, typically your equity is like your voting power. So remember I said equity is like the portion of your ownership because of how much you pitched in. So your equity is like your voting power. You have a certain amount of shares in a company, you can vote on how who you want to be on the board. You can vote for different things like corporations who are publicly listed. They're on the stock exchanges. People buy their stock and they own shares. They own a piece of that company. Sometimes that corporation is going to hold an election of some sort and say, hey, go ahead and vote for which way you want to go about this. And the shareholders will go and vote on it. But the board of directors is always making those options clear. So the board of directors is always doing the research and organizing the information, and they clarify what the options are to the rest of the shareholders, and they hold the vote, the election. They hold the vote for shareholders to decide, should we go left or should we go right? But what is left, what is right, that's decided by the board of directors. And before I even set up the board of directors, I would need to know, how should we come up with that investment strategy? And I've thought of a few ways, but that's what I'm working on. I have to figure out the investment strategy. And this leads me to think that I need a system for deliberation. Now, I'm a political science student, so I'm going to draw on that background to help me determine how best to organize people. And so deliberation is the whole reason why we have democracy. Deliberation is why we have, the free world, like they would say, in a sense where people know that they should have these individual rights, and people know that they want autonomy and they don't want this bigger power infringing on it, okay? So that's like freedom and that kind of stuff. What I mean is that deliberation allows for us to interact with each other in order to find solutions. It allows us to find common ground, and it allows us to show the differences, like even if when we disagree. But what deliberation does is it brings all that stuff to the front, and it allows us to still work together. Because even if you didn't get your way in democracy, you still participate in the whole democratic culture and the whole process of this thing. So same thing here with this investment group. It would follow all the same principles that our nation is founded upon and our nation works by, of course, because there's laws. But how are we going to create our own type of laws, or how do we create our own type of system within to make sure this all works out, and that even when people disagree, there's a way to work it out, continue working on the investments and move everything forward. And you may disagree with how something went, but in this game, when you're investing, we call it's up to the market. As you say, it's out of our hands. And as a man of faith, I would say it's in God's hands now. So we do our part, and we need to make decisions to invest. But up until that point that we invest, we're doing all the research. We're taking things into our hands. So when we do make that decision and we do make that move, pull the trigger, put the investment, it's out of our hands. And if someone disagreed with that decision, well, they're going to find out whether they were wrong or right, but they can disagree. It's totally fine. So deliberation is an important part that I have to think about. Good thing I have a great background for this. And what I've came up with was just to have certain meetings at certain times to focus on certain things. So this is a really deep explanation. I want to summarize that putting together the board of directors involves 3 different elements that I'm working on. And it's finding the founding investors, the people who are going to start this off with me, put money forward. I want to also come up with some type of structure for an investment strategy, since I have a background in the field. I was a financial advisor and I understand investing. So I'll put together some type of framework, and with that, we will elaborate on this investment strategy so that we can actually pull triggers, place investments. And then the third thing is the deliberation. How do we have meetings? What kind of meetings? What do we focus on? How do we talk about things? And that's something that I've got a plan for. I'm real organized about. But these, see, so I don't want to say that. I'm